All right, we're back. We are COMP1073, client-side scripting here at Georgian College in the winter 2017 semester, and we are week 11. Can you believe it already? Week 11, part one of our broadcast, and we're talking about jQuery validation and AJAX with jQuery today, page form validation. We're going to start off with that, and then what I also want to get into in the second part of this day today is I also want to talk about create.js, because your next project, which is coming next week, we're going to make a banner ad. That's the last assignment you're going to get with the library called create.js, where you're actually going to use a library. This is the first app API you're going to be using to connect to a library that allows you to create graphics, right? With JavaScript, pure JavaScript. Something next week. If I can, I'll start with it today to give you a head start on some of this stuff. We need to use TypeScript for this one because we've talked about TypeScript before and how TypeScript is a superset of JavaScript. It's going to prepare you for when you use TypeScript. And just to recant what this is. So TypeScript. It's going to help you with things like server-side scripting. When you do server-side scripting, you're going to be using with the mean stack. You're going to be using Mongo, Express, Angular, and Angular 2 is going to Angular 4 now. Angular 4. With Node.js, right? The mean stack. I know it's crazy. I went from Angular 2 to Angular 4 in a week, and that's what happens with JavaScript and all front-end libraries. They really move quickly on the web, which makes it very challenging to learn everything. So we're going to be talking about this next, but for now, we're starting off with what we talked about last week, and just as a review, we talked about jQuery. jQuery was what we were looking at, right? jQuery is, like we said last week, just as a review, is a set of libraries, right, or classes that are included in the library that are compatible 100% with JavaScript, ECMAScript 5 level JavaScript, the old version of JavaScript, and the new version of JavaScript. It's a big library that has lots of little functionalities, and one of the things we want to talk about today is how to work with forms and data validation when it comes to using jQuery. So I'm going to start with this first. In order for us to get there, of course, we're going to do like we always do, create a sample project. So I'm going to kind of open up our COMP1073 folder. These are all the files we have. We're going to make a duplicate of this one, like we always do. Again, you might have seen this 10 times by now, or this is the 11th time, right? Where we're actually making a new folder here. And all I'm doing here before I get into this is modifying my folders, my folder structure, so that way I can take away any reference to less than 10, make it less than 11. And I also have a package.json file now that I'm using for code hinting. Remember, we talked about code hinting last week. And one thing we did was we added this @types package through npm, Node Package Manager, where we added code hinting for jQuery, right? Now this it's not required that you use TypeScript. You can use pure JavaScript and still get good code hinting, right? And one of the problems we have with new libraries that we import in our files is the idea that they require code hinting that we don't have. We have to constantly look up our API documentation, go up online, take a look at the library and say, how do I do this function? I want to do this. I don't know how to do it. How do I do that? And what it does here, it helps us write the code, so it makes it a little easier for us as developers. Okay, so that's this we added in last time in our package.json file. That's why we have that. We also have a tsconfig.json file that we've left in here. We haven't touched this. That allows us, if we want to transpile from JavaScript or from TypeScript to JavaScript, which we're not going to do right now. And a README file that basically says OOP continue, which is not true. This is totally wrong. This should have been week 11, right? Week 11, this should have been, jQuery part 2, right? Which is including a form of validation and jQuery for AJAX, right? Which is the key, which is something we all want to know. If we don't know those kind of things, then cancel. Then we're going to use the old way of doing things with JavaScript, which is more difficult. So that's really what we're covering today. in a nutshell. Let's start off with what we're covering right now in this video, right, that we're making. So I've got this stuff changed. What I want to do is get rid of my .git folder. So again, I can open up a terminal session or command prompts, and I can go cd, and this works on the PC as well, drag and drop your folder. And in there, what I want to do is remove my -rf on the Mac or on a Linux machine, .git, right, which is going to clean up my Git folder. If you have a PC, you're going to right-click or double-click in here. And inside here, you'll see if you've got files and folder permissions ready, right-click and delete the .git folder that you'll see here, and that'll do the same thing. Okay. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to set up a new Git repository. So git init, right? Git add dots. These are all, I'm just repeating again. Git commit -m, which is for message initial commits. And that sets up our local repository here on my computer. And now what I need to do is set up a remote, right? So as we normally do, we're going to go into GitHub. I'm just going to pull up another tab here, GitHub, and I want to go to Georgian, and I'm going to click on new, which is going to allow me to create a new repository. So COMP1073, right? Winter 2017, and it's lesson 11. Yay, cool, there it is. Now with that, we can go ahead and grab these last two lines here, which we always do, and kind of go in here and paste them and enter. And then if you submitted your credentials on your command line, you can do this. Otherwise, you'll have to log in every time, right? Which is totally fine. It's not that difficult. Okay, cool. So now if I check up on my GitHub repo, you can see this. So if you want to start from here, if you, for example, couldn't follow along last week, you're away, or you're working remotely and you want to follow along from with what I'm doing, just grab this lesson 11 file and go from there. Okay. Okay, so that's step one. Step two, let's get into our stuff that we were doing last week. So if I look at my app.js again, you can see that this is my app.js, and I've got this XHR stuff. Well, this is a great opportunity for us to do some validation. And we have our contact page. Here's our contact page, right? And if you, as we scroll down, here's my home page that displays my home page. This is the function that we call to display all the information on our home page, right? And there's other functions down here, load project for our project page. And there's got to be one that says load contact. There's our load contact page, right? Which does, right now, all it sends is all of our contact information. It sends to the console. That's what it does. Okay. Nice, nice. But what we want to do is some more validation. Let's talk about some validation techniques that we can use. Okay, so if we look at forms themselves and what they do, again, and it's a little bit compressed here, but a form contains one or more controls or fields like text boxes, radio buttons, lists, all those kind of things. When you click on a submit button for a form, right, and the type is submit, the form data is sent to the server as part of an HTTP request. And when you click on the reset button for a form, type is reset, the form data is reset to its default values, right? When a form is submitted to the server for processing, the data and the control is sent along the HTTP request. So you do this whole request response loop. All right, so I send a request to the server, it goes out to the server, and then when the server has a response, it responds with the data, right? Now when I send a request, what actually happens for a form is the server processes the form. So there's server-side processing, right, usually. Example, if I send a form to PHP, right? And let's say the PHP side is going to process the form itself, especially with the contact form, right? The contact form it's going to process the information in my contact form, and if it's correct, it's going to return thank you very much for your email or whatever it's going to be, right? Other generic information, when you use a GET method to submit a form, the URL that requests the file is followed by a question mark, right? And a name value pairs or key value pairs that are separated by ampersands are sent along in the URL. So the URL itself, if I send in, for example, question mark after my URL, and then I put in something like my name is equal to, and then some kind of value. There's one part is the name of the variable that I'm sending across to the other form, and the second part is the value that is going to be filled into the variable that I'm sending across to the other form, right? And then if I use an ampersand, I can separate other values in there, and the way it would look like Okay, as an example, if I was just going to go to a random page here, if I go to my Google homepage, right, and if I do something weird, like for example, I search for something. So let's say if I search for, you know, WWDC, which is Apple Developer Conference, right? That's happening this year. I think it's in San Diego, right? Notice that we have a bunch of links. Now, in this case, the way we're going through it, that's on the little graphic. The way we're going through it is whenever I put in a URL, the URL means up here, right? If I was to enter some weird stuff like, I don't know, WWDC, and then if I put a question mark and then something like where my name is equal to Tom, right? That's not going to work. But it would actually send a GET request, right? And of course, it's going to say, I don't know what you're talking about, name is equal to Tom. But that's what it would look like if I was sending information across on my URL, right? If I separated it with an ampersand and my, I don't know, number, right, is equal to, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, let's say, right? Then again, it would send that GET request with 2 pieces of information, my name and number, right? That would go across to another website, right? That's the way we send stuff with a GET request. If it's a POST request, it will not show anything on the URL. This is just reviewing some basic things that happens. By the way, for those people, as an aside, who are interested in going to the WWDC in San Jose, actually, it's June 5th to 9th, and you have to have an Apple ID, Apple Developer ID, and check this out again, just like before. Anyone know what the cost is for someone to go if you get selected in Canada? Well, it's $15.99 US if you get selected, and it's random selection. Not everyone gets selected to go, right? Apple selects you randomly if you're a developer, and so it works out to be $2,100, something like that, Canadian. And that's if you get selected. If you're lucky, right, you can pay your $2,100, right? But you have to register ahead of time, and you have to give them authorization to take your money. It's great, though. I have to tell you, it's a great conference to be a part of if you're a mobile developer. Any of these kind of conferences. The other big one, if you're a game developer, is the GDC, right? Game Development Conference. If you're a game developer, that already happened, and that was in San Francisco, if I'm not wrong. So there's all these conferences happening remote, right? But there's also some conferences happening here near Toronto. For example, I believe there's one thing called the FITC conference, I think down in Toronto. It used to be called Flash in the Pan, or Flash in the Can, sorry. So FITC, let me go there for a second. FITC Toronto, I think it's called. Right, now that, if I'm not wrong, is that happening in April, or that already happened? Let me take a look. Yeah, April 23rd to 25th. If you're a web developer, right, web dev, if you're someone who does design or anything like that, this is the place to go. And I know that Scott, definitely from our clan here, our fearless leader Scott, he's definitely going. And I know that there's other people going to go down from Georgian. So if you're interested in going, I think there's a student rate that you can get to go and visit FITC. So send a short email. I'm not sure what it is from Scott, but if you shoot him an email if you're interested in going down to Toronto for those 3 days. I think this is after a semester for you guys too, right? After semester is over. So that might be a good time between semester to go and visit if you're interested in web development. You can't go wrong. There's all kinds of speakers and stuff down at FITC, right? So take a look. There's some really popular ones. Usually there's different people here. By the way, I'm not associated with FITC. I'm not trying to advertise, but I think it's a good conference for anybody, especially a young developer, to go to. Let's see if I recognize anybody off the top. That's pretty awesome. The Mill, CodePen, that's really cool, right? And I'm trying to say Intel, so Intel is down there as well. That's Shopify, that's pretty cool. Slack, that's really cool. We got a person who develops for Slack as well, Ringle. So I think there's some really cool things. So they're showing 40 of 1,500 speakers that are there that you can sign up for different events from down there. So I think it's totally worth going down. There's lots of stuff to see for anybody who's a web developer, especially on the floor. And you can get ideas of new technologies coming, and you can hear different kinds of things in terms of technologies, from a web development perspective and so on, as you can see. So really cool things to go to. Hey, let's try that little trick here. If I put ID is equal to, is it going to crash? Right? If I say my ID is equal to Tom, right? What's going to happen there? By the way, sometimes it doesn't do anything, right? And sometimes it just goes to a 404, depending on what happens. But that's the way we send information across a page. We go on the URL. I'm just using this as a means of distracting you, right? So we go to the URL, put a question mark after the link, and then it sends that information to the server. Now, in this case, the information is being ignored by the server because it's not listening for this, right? But in other cases, if you set up this way, you can go to it might take you to the exact, that's cool, to the exact stuff that you'd be going to, you want to go to on your page. All right, so that's really what it tells you here. And the post method, the data is hidden. And we want to use post methodology when it comes to things like sending secure information. If I'm using any kind of credit card, sending credit card information, if I'm logging in, definitely a post methodology. I'm not going to log in or register with GET. So that's the thing when we set up a form. Now, when we talk about data validation, what we're really talking about is checking that the data collected by a form is right before it goes to the server. Because if it's not right, it's going to make that round trip and maybe cause an error on your page, which we don't like, right? So that's what we can do with validation. Now, the thing with client-side, I have to also mention client-side validation. The problem with client-side validation is what? What's the problem? If I do client-side validation, they can disable JavaScript. So even if you use jQuery, JavaScript, it doesn't matter. It'll be ignored, right? Which is, from a security standpoint, not the best way. But what we do is it's our first line of defense. The first line of defense when it comes to any kind of form validation is JavaScript or jQuery on the page. Now, remember, when we made this jQuery stuff for validation, back in the day, we did not have HTML validation built in. Right now, if I put in an email type, right, so input type is equal to email, and if I don't put a proper email address that I think in my mind is proper email address, it will not allow you to go forward, right? Because of HTML standards have changed, right? But back in the day, we didn't have that. We didn't have any kind of validation with HTML. Everything was done with JavaScript or jQuery on the front end and with PHP, mostly PHP, by the way, on the back end, right? Because PHP takes up 80% of our back end websites still are managed by PHP today, right? Which is still quite a large footprint for PHP being the oldest technology out there from a web perspective on the back end. So there's some filters we can use, right, where we can target different things. For example, we're targeting here all form elements. Let me just zoom in here so you can see this little thing here. All form elements where we have input select, text area, or button that are inputs. That's what I'm targeting. Remember, jQuery is the way for us to select an element. I can target certain elements in the page. So when I choose input, :input, that filters all input type elements. That's what I'm looking for. If I want to look for text, all input boxes, text input. If I want to look for, and what's not included here is :email, all email type boxes, and that kind of stuff. You can target whatever you like here. File, password, submit buttons. There's a submit button that I want to target. My reset button, images, buttons. I can look for all elements that are disabled or enabled that have those attributes, and so on. So that's one way we can target certain elements on our page. We've talked about something like this before. All right. Now, we also talked about the ability for us to create an event handler where we prevent a default. We've already done this, right? Look on our page. If we actually look at inside of our page itself, we have this ability to add an event listener to the click function of our send button. There's a send button, right? Send button.add event listener. And when we click on the button, right, we're going to use this idea of prevent default. This is just a recap of what we can do with JavaScript. So how do I write this in jQuery? Well, we've already kind of written it. We said our send button, right, is an array. Remember, whenever we say, hey, jQuery with a $sign as a review, it returns an array of elements, all elements that match the ID of send button as an example, right? We don't want all elements. We just want the first one. So that's why we're using this square bracket 0. It says, hey, just return the 0th element, the first element in the array. I want that back. And I want you to reference it inside of our send button. Okay, that's what's happening here, right? Now I'm using send button add event listener click, right? But I don't have to do this. What's the jQuery way of doing this? What's the one way to do it? What was that? Send button dot click. I could, because, but remember the dot click Send button, is it jQuery? Can I do .click? I can't, right? If I do send button .click, right, that won't work. If I go like .click, right? I mean, it says that I can do it, right? This .click event, right? But will it really disable everything, the .click event? Is send button jQuery? No, right now the way we've written it, it's an HTML element, right? Because we've used this. To make it jQuery, right, where we can use the .click, right? Then we have to take away these things here, right? So now send button isn't no longer a HTML element, it's jQuery. Now when I go over here and I look at this, it's the jQuery click event. Now it'll work. If you did it before, wouldn't work, right? Not the way you expect. So this actually works this way. What's the other way? We talked about 2 ways last week of setting up a click event. What's the other way? There's another way we talked about. Come on. You guys don't remember, do you? I know, it's why I'm doing this review, right? So you guys can remember this stuff, right? So where do we have it? We probably had it somewhere up here where when we talked about this, attributes last week and how to change the attribute of a class and the color, all that kind of stuff. And we did that in our projects page, right? We showed you that, right? And then we also talked about other ways of doing events. Let's see if I put it up here so you can be reminded of it. Set attribute on ready state change. No. It's probably at the bottom. Bear with me while I bring it up. But we did give an example of that, right? Where, here we go, on, right? So this is the other way, right? I can use on and double click depending on what kind of I want, right? That basically says, hey, whatever you're targeting, whenever I click on it, and I can choose whatever the kind of event is here, which, by the way, I prefer, right? So again, in our context, it's actually right below, yes? Yep. So you would do send button dot on, right? And on click, then you do the function. Okay. Why is this better? It gives us more control. It's still using jQuery, so I don't have to write add event listener, right? That's what it helps us with. It avoids doing all that stuff altogether, and it still gives us the same functionality. Let's check it to see if it's true, right? So if I'm going to go over here to our, not here, to our form, thank you FITC, thank you GDC, thank you WWDC, right? We don't need those anymore, right? What we do need is some kind of space for our application. And I'm going to go here, and I'm going to say something like light-server, which is going to take us to this. Here's a little game list, right? And if I go to contact me page, here's my contact page. If I put some information in there, my contact number, 416-555-5555, and my email address, right, tom@example.com, and my message, here's a message. I click send, right? What's going to happen is, notice that it didn't clear, right? What it really did happen, if you notice what we did before, if I look at inspect, if everything went well, right, then I should have everything underneath here, but uh-oh, we got a problem. I got full name, contact number, and email, but I'm actually returning the elements here. Why am I returning the elements? Because of what I told jQuery to do. Remember, I did this, and I'm actually saying, hey, return full name, contact number, email, and message, right? Now, that's what it's actually printing out. Now, this prevents it from happening. Remember this preventing behavior? It stops it from submitting the page. But my full name now represents my full name, like the actual object itself, right? I don't want this. I want my full name dot what? What is this? What is this? Is it value? Right? Remember, we're using JavaScript. We're mixing JavaScript and jQuery here. So let me take a look at the projects page. Let's look at the load contact page for a second. So here's our contact page, right? And we're getting links to full name, contact number, email, and message. Those are the links we're getting to, right? These are IDs, right? How would I make this happen? If I was going to convert all this to jQuery, let's convert together, right? How would I convert all these to jQuery? Can anyone give me a hand? How about this table here? Does anyone want to help me write 190? Let's rewrite line 190. How do I rewrite that? First of all, do I want to use vars in our new reality or lets, right? I think let is the better way to do it, right? Let is more forward compatible with everything else. We're going to say let full name. I'll start it for you, okay? And I'll comment this one out. All right, so let me do this one. Okay, so how do I write full name? I'm just going to go with one of you guys to test you. What's your name? Okay, Ernest, help me out. Help me write this full name. So let full name is equal to $, yeah? Yeah? Quotations, right? And then what should I write in there? Hashtag full name. Okay, so what does this do for us, right? If we just did this, this doesn't do this, right? This returns an array, right? So if I look at full name now, it's a jQuery object, right? If I want one object, just one, then I want to do something like this, right? So this will give me one object, right? But hear me out here. We're trying to use jQuery, right? So let's not do this one. We want a reference to the query that this returns, right? And so now down here, how do I turn this full name query, right, into something that I can use? And if you remember jQuery, we have some functionality here, right? Because of this, I can do something like val, right? And what val does is if I do this, it actually returns the value of the object. Now this is different. What's the value of my ID? Think about this now. This is something we're going to have to figure out. Because remember, it says, if I hover over, it says get the current value of the first element in the set of matched elements. First value, right? So what would this return? Let's go back and try this again. So if I was to, here's my page. Let's try it again. And if I go Tom, this, and I put the rest of the information in there. And Tom@example.com, sure. And my message, a message. There we go. If I can spell properly. Right? Not a massage, a message. And if I click send, right, then I get the following. Tom, right? See? So even though I didn't specify, you know, the name, the value field, or remember, this is what this looks like. This is what these inputs look like. We have a type, right? We have an ID, we have a placeholder, and you know, this is what this is. The value actually sits inside of this object, right? The value, right? So what it does is that whatever value I put in there is what it returns out. That's how simple it is. That's why jQuery is so powerful, right? I don't have to do all those other dances that we do with JavaScript. It makes it easier, right? So again, same thing with our contact number. If I was going to go with this, once I have this pattern, right? This pattern right here, it's easier to destroy than to build. So I'm going to kind of do one of these, right? That's my common theme for this week. Easier to destroy than to build. I'm going to cut this out here and put it in here and kill all this, right? I don't need this comment anymore because we're just changing everything, right? We'll do the same thing over here. I'll take this part over here, copy, and we'll paste it over here. And we'll just grab this stuff, this email stuff, we'll cut it and put it in there. And we'll kill all this. I'm just restructuring everything so you see how easy it is when we use jQuery, right? Okay, good. And we'll kill all this. So actually take the message, cut this and put it in here. And kill all this. Cool. We've done this part. All jQuery now, converting, right? And over here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this into vals, right? So .val and .val. We'll just copy this whole part right here. There we go, here, and we'll put it in there and there. Okay, so there we go. Cool. So I've done my work, right? I'm able to output the value now of each of these items, right, out to the console. All right, so let's take a look. It's cleared up for me, and we'll start adding things in, right? So I'll say Tom, right, and my contact number, email address, a message, a message, a message. Okay, 2 messages. Send. Right, now I got my stuff. Okay, curious, I'm also getting an undefined, right? This undefined value right here. And it's happening on 197, right? So 197, I'm getting an undefined. It's not an error necessarily, but something's going on, right? What is that that's giving me undefined? And you can see that my send button.text content not working anymore. right? Why is that? Because my send button, the text content doesn't work that way anymore for jQuery, right? Send button is now jQuery object, right? So if I go back to this, send button is now a jQuery object, right? So if I want to have my send button show what the button is, right, by doing the console.log, there is no text content with jQuery. However, there is if I scroll back and go dot, if I start typing text, right, like this, it'll actually return my text object, right? And even if I say this and go back, you can see immediately that I get sent, right? So if I was to look at that and inspect again, the send button, oops, on the console, the send button shows send now, right? Because I've changed it from what it was before, right? Which was text content to text. This returns. Remember, you can set, this is the getter. The getter is text with open bracket, close bracket. If I want to set, for example, I want to set the text content to something else, right? I can probably do it right in here too. I can probably say something like, you know, don't send, right, within in a bracket. So don't send. There we go. I don't know. If I go back, you can see that it's going to return something weird, right? I'm trying to return the value of a button, my send button, right? And it's trying to figure out what I'm trying to do here, right? I'm trying to set a value, but at the same time, I'm trying to get a value. And I'm right, what it's actually doing is returning a reference to the button itself. Now, if I was to do this, send button, send text, just a moment, up here first, just to show you that the getter and setter, and as a reminder that the getter and setter is the same. So this is the, remember, this is the setter. Let me call it. This is the setter, right? And this is the getter, right? By the way, they're also called the set accessor method and the get accessor method. That's what they're normally called, setter and getter, right? Or getter and setter. So if I do this and if I go back, you can see that it says don't send, right? Because my button now has changed to don't send, right? I can set the value of whatever the button is automatically, right? So both functions, you can see the method is the same. Where one method I send nothing, the other method I'm actually sending the change. If I don't send a change, it tells jQuery to return what's already there. Give me what's already there if I don't put anything inside of there. Otherwise, if I put something inside of there, change what's already there to what I put to what I give you. Okay, that's what this thing does. Setter and getter, right? Well, obviously we don't want to do this. We don't want to do this at all, right? We don't want to change the button from send to something else. Okay, and that's why we're getting that issue. Okay, and we have some other examples here of events. So here, all we're doing is reviewing somewhat what we talked about last week or weeks before, but also adding in this idea of preventing a default method of the event and canceling the submission. We don't want to cancel. We don't want to actually do the submission until we're ready, right? So how do I submit the detail? If I want to submit my page with jQuery, right? How do I submit it? Can I submit the page manually with jQuery? What do you think? I got my detail. I'm canceling with prevent default, right? Prevent default stops me from submitting my data, stops me from sending my data to the server, right? I can use AJAX if I want, but right now I want to use jQuery to send the data by making it send the data without me clicking the button. I'm going to prevent the default data. I want to spit out everything to the console. That's what I want to do. What about if I'm ready to send? I'm ready to send everything now. How do I actually, submit that? And let's make it like this. Okay, let's make a little piece of jQuery that stops it from happening. So when I click send, right now, it doesn't allow me to. It prevents the default. Even the checking is prevented. Like I can type in whatever I want here. Let me show you, right? And because I've prevented default, this is a bad thing about preventing default, right? If I prevent default, and I'm just going to bring up this page for a second so you can see. Here's my inspector, right? I'm preventing defaults. So all of my data that's here, if I click send, I'm going to get it right away, right? It's not going to stop me from entering garbage now inside here because I prevented default, right? Does that make sense? The form itself will prevent me from doing the validation because I prevented default. I asked you to prevent default for one of your assignments, right? But the challenge is now I can enter whatever data that I want in there, right? Which is a problem, right? I want to do form validation, but I also want to send some information off to something else. When I want to do that, right, we may need to do our own validation on the front end ourselves, right? For example, we want to be able to check to see if what we entered in the name is greater than a certain length. As an example, it's bigger than a certain value. We want to check that the number has a certain format. We want to check that the email address has an @ sign. We want to check that the message, right, has some kind of data inside of it. These are all things that are required, right? Well, remember we talked about the 3 levels, right? So first thing is our presentation, our structure, which is HTML. Second thing, which is a presentation, which is CSS. You fall back on that second. And the third thing, the last thing, is JavaScript for behavior, right? Here, what we're doing is we're preventing the first one from working, which is HTML. It's preventing that first line of defense for us. Our first line of defense really is the front side stuff, the client side stuff, and it's HTML. That's our first line. Second line is CSS, then JavaScript, and then the backend, right? So we prevented that from happening in this particular case. But let's suppose that this is what we want. This is the behavior that we want. Let's suppose, all right, that this is what we want to do, right? So one thing we can do for the forms itself is we can check to see different event types. For example, if I use focus, right, I can focus on a particular item. So shift the focus to that particular element, right? I can do that. Like for example, when I want to, right, and let me show you this. And notice that my name here is some garbage, right? But I want to focus on my name and highlight everything. Is there a way of doing that with jQuery? Right, let's take a look. So again, I've got this stuff here. This is preventing default, and I'm shooting this out to the console. But at the same time, what I want to do is I want to focus, just to test this out, I want to shift focus to the full name, right? So I'll say full name dot focus. Now it says to trigger the focus event on an element. Okay, cool. Focus. What does that do? Right, let's see. So I enter some garbage in here, right? Because now I can, because I've prevented my default options. I click send, and automatically notice that it goes right back up here. My cursor moves up here to this thing. It's actually there, right? So I set the focus. Focus means where's my cursor going to end up? That's what it does when I send it over there. Number one. The other thing is, what if I want to do something else? What else can I do with my full name, right? Can I select anything else? So if I want to select, so let's say I use select, right? And by the way, is there more than one method or handler here? Look, there's 3, right? Notice it says 1 of 3. This is the beautiful thing about getting code hinting, right? So one of them, the first one is, if I click over here, you can see it's just select, right? With nothing inside of it, with nothing inside the select statement. Click it again, it gives me, okay, a handler I can send over, a function to execute each time the event is triggered. Each time the event is selected, this thing is selected, my full name, do something, right? And the last one is, right, here's my event data as an object, right, and a handler to follow up. So it says, an object containing data that will be passed to the event handler, and build an event handler to the select JavaScript event. So that's kind of thing. Let's just do this one first. Let's see what select does. All right, so okay, select. Go back, and if I start typing, right, and I click on send, you can see that it still will work because I'm not checking for any kind of thing. It says Tom, right? Here's my Tom event, right? Hey, that's weird. Hold on a second. Let's try that again. So I'll say, James Bond, right? And I click send, and then boom, James Bond's highlighted, right? So select, what it actually does is, right, it highlights or selects all the data that's inside of that field, right? Now, this is the first steps we need for validation, because if the validation fails, what do I want to do? I want to shift the focus back to that element that didn't work, and I want to highlight that element. So next time I type in here, it replaces, right, what's in there before, right? Now, by the way, there's the same way that I'm doing it here works with ASP.NET. It works with pretty much any other front-end framework, right? That does the same thing, right? Whenever you use a select or select all, different frameworks call it different things. The select method with jQuery does that. Now, to do this with JavaScript is a little bit more complex, right? And it's a little longer. You have to do it in many, many more steps. Here, I'm doing it with one thing. I'm making the selector happen, and then I'm selecting it, I'm selecting the query that I'm getting. Whatever I'm returning from the query, I'm selecting that first thing, right? By the way, you have to be careful because if you have more than one thing that matches the query, it selects them all, right? Which is negative, right? Okay, so that's one. So this is all selected. And then when I click tab, right, it's going to go to the next field, the next field, the next field. These are all the things that are going to happen, the tab order, right? Notice that it does that. So that's one thing that we will do with jQuery. We can do a couple things for us. So first, we can test. We haven't done that yet, but we can test to see if we've got the wrong information coming out of full name. And if we do, we can set the focus back to that element that didn't work and then select it. So that select statement says, make sure that everything is selected so I can replace it with something else. Yeah.
Tom, I have a question. How did you see the overloads for the method?
Remember, I downloaded this in my package.json file. If you've downloaded my stuff, I have this @types jQuery, right? When I downloaded and installed this in my VS Code, what it does is it gives me code hinting. And then when I type it in, if I go back to my app.js here, right? So if I start typing, let's start typing that select statement again, right? So I go .select. If I start doing this, notice that when I don't complete it, look what it has here. Take a look right on here. If I've got my code hinting working properly, then I can kind of go to those each signature of the method, right? Because they've got 3 overloaded methods, right? That's what they're using here in jQuery. Right, that's the way you do it. But it's only available if you've got your code hinting turned on. If you don't, you have nothing, right? That means you haven't downloaded and installed the typing. Okay, so that's cool. So this is the methodology we're going to use to highlight an area or go to an area that failed for us for some reason or another. Again, we're talking about little steps first. All right, blur. Here's one thing. So focus, we talked about. Blur, what it does is it removes the focus from the selected element. Okay. How about change? That's really interesting because what the change event does is as I'm changing things, it's checking, right? So as I type, this event is going to be triggered automatically. Okay, let's think of that. So let's try this out. So now here's what I want to do, all right? And again, this is all special effects. As I'm typing my name, I want it to print out my name to the console, right? So notice that this would be the thing that I want to show. So I'm going to copy this. Let me just comment these out for a second. So let's just work with the name for a second, okay? And what I want to do, this is the event, right? So I want to kind of do something like this. So I want to say full name dot, and again, change, right? Now it says it triggered the change event on an element. Okay, cool, change. I open it up, there's 3 overloads. One is the change event, cool. Next one, I have some kind of object that I'm returning some kind of data, a function to execute each time the event is triggered. That's what I want, right? So some kind of event handler, like an anonymous function that triggers whenever I'm changing something. Okay, this is the one that I want. Okay, so on my change event, I want to make an anonymous function that triggers every time that I change something with my full name. Anytime the full name changes, I want to show the value on the console. All right, so every time the full name changes. I mean, I'm trying to give you some hints on how to do the validation, right? All right, let's try this out now. So back to here. Remember, we all we care about is this. So if I start typing, right, then it should be able to show me what I want, right? But how come for jQuery, right? It's trying to do things dynamically, but I'm not getting anything. My change events isn't really triggering. How come? I know the idea that I have an idea of what I want to do, right? But how come this isn't working, right? So what would you check first? If it's not working the way you want, what's the thing to think about? Anybody have an idea? I'm trying to use jQuery and it's not working at all. I'm getting 0 back. What's the first thing you check? What's the first thing you do for debugging? I'm going to ask this table over here. What was the first thing? If I had this problem and you were debugging this issue, what's the first thing that I would do to debug this problem on 204? Line 204. It's not printing out. It's not doing anything. What would I do? Any ideas? Come on, fire them out. Just try it out. Don't worry. This is a safe environment. What?
Change the name.
Change the name. Okay, that's one option. Okay, maybe not. But how about Daniel in the back? what would you do differently? If it's not printing anything out, what would you do to troubleshoot? Yes, that's it. That's perfect. I would put a string in there, right? Anything, so I know that I'm getting in there. Do I even know that I'm getting in there right now on the change event? No, we don't know that, right? So let's see if it's not even triggering. So I'm going to go in here and just put in a console.log that says something like changed. So full name changed. We know that something's changed. If this is not triggering, what the hell, right? There's a reason for all this, by the way, right? Okay, let's go back. Put my name in there, and I start typing, and I go to the next part, and I got nothing, right? So we know for sure, because this keeps on rebooting, right? See how this keeps on rebooting? We know that it's not this, right? We know that even though if I submit, let me say click submit here, you can see that this part works, that the highlighting works. So that still works out, right? But whenever I change something here, I'm not getting anything. Oh, wait a minute. What happened? How come it worked now? Well, we reloaded the page. Okay, let's go back. If that's true, then if I start typing stuff, right, when does the change get triggered, right? How come it's working now? And when does it get triggered, right? First of all, it gets triggered when I leave, when I navigate away from the page, from the link somehow, it gets triggered, right? It wasn't working because, and the troubleshooting was correct, maybe I didn't reload the page somehow, right? Now that I've reloaded the page, and I thought it would have reloaded, if I start typing Tom and I go there, well, wait a minute, how come it didn't get, how come that didn't happen, right? It's the way we've written stuff too, guys. Look, take a look at this. None of this is going to happen because all of this is inside of my send button.on event, right? That's number one. It's only going to happen when I click on once on when I'm going to trigger it one time. I'm going to set up this change event one time, only when I set this up. So if I want to make this work, right, I need to take this out, right? Let me just take it out here. So this part here, I'm going to cut it, and let's put it outside here for a second, right? So whenever I, before I submit, again, troubleshooting 101, right? We want to try and figure out what's happening. Now this is, I've taken it out of the submit button. That was inside the submit button, right? So I'm just kind of, we'll go back in there, and actually I'll just delete all the extra spaces here and leave those comments in, right? So here, right, I'm outside of the submit button. So this is outside submit event, right? Because this is what's happening on the send button click event, which actually the click event, send button click event, that's what's really happening. I haven't submitted yet, right? The send button gets clicked, I'm outside of this. This is inside, right? Anything inside is, this is the actual send button click event, right? Send button click event. And this inside here, right, is inside, right? Inside the send button click event. That's what this is. This is what this is, right? So this is outside, this is inside. All right, so now let's see what happens. If I save, if I go back to here, and if I start pressing some stuff in here, so I start pressing Tom and press Tab, now I get it all the time. And especially if I go back and forth, right? If I change anything and go back, it gets sent. Any changes, it gets sent every single time, right? And it'll happen on the first time, right? But notice what's happening. The only way it's registering a change is if physically I've moved focus. It's lost focus from the text box that I've printed in my name to the new text box that I'm looking at. So I've lost focus. I'm actually, it's gone to the blur event, actually, what's happened, right? Once I've lost focus. Okay, so that's what's happening here. Okay, now that we know that that's the problem, we can get rid of this little console log for debugging, right? So we did our little thing here. So we know that's when it happens. So this happens when, this triggers when, so change event triggers when focus is lost, right? That's what's happening right now. Okay. Actually, it's when blur occurs too, right? Blur and focus are the opposite. Okay, so that's cool. I like that. Well, okay, that's interesting that I can do that with my my change. It says an event handler to the change JavaScript event. What other things can I do though? So I can do, let's see what other kind of things I can do. So full name, we have a lot of stuff we can do with full name because full name is a jQuery object, right? I can add a class, I can complete AJAX, we can talk about AJAX in a bit. I can animate, right? I can append, I can blur, bind, unbind, on, off, you know, all these kind of things I can do with them. I can use a click or a clone, right? All this kind of stuff, right? We did the change. What? Fading out. Okay, fading out is a totally different thing. So fading out makes actually, you know, kind of gets rid of in a little animation, you know, fades out something. So if I want to try this out, it's a special effect, which is hiding the elements, whatever it is, by fading them out to transparent. It's going to fade it out, and you actually can create a duration, whatever the duration is, which is a string. Seconds, right? And you can do something here. If you notice the overload, it happens. What happens on complete? When it's done, what do you want to do, right? So just for you, just because you want me to do it, right? I'm going to fade out, right? The duration is going to be 5,000 milliseconds, right? And then when we're complete, right, I want to do something else. I want to do a function, right, that fades me back in. So I'll say this dot fade. I want to fade in now, right? So I want to show, basically. How can I get this? This is what I want to do, right? Dot fade in. That's what I want. That's how I want to scope it in, right? Fade in. And you can see that I want to fade in afterwards for another 5,000 milliseconds. And that's all I want. There we go. So I'm going to fade out, fade in. Huh? Well, let's see what happens. All right, so if I go back in here and I save this thing here, notice that it went away and now slowly it's coming back. Right? So let me show you that again, guys. Take a look at the your name area, right? So I want to refresh. And you can see that now it's starting to fade out, fade out, fade out, and then it's over 5 seconds. And then after it's done fading out, it's going to fade back in, fade back in, fade back in, over 5 seconds. So that's the effect. That's the fade out, just to satisfy your curiosity. Fade in and fade out. Okay, but that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for validation, right? So let's just get back here. I wasn't looking for this. I was looking for some other way of affecting the element inside, right? So we have our change event. That's one thing, right? We have our click event and closest and context and DQ and errors and all kinds of other stuff. We have finds and hashes and finishes and gets and a bunch of other stuff here, right? Key down, we have a key down event, right? Okay. And we have a key press event and a key up event. All right, how about the key down? What does that do? So if I do a key down event, right, it says trigger the key down event on an element. Okay. So one of them is this one, so nothing. Cool. The other one is what happens when you get a key down, right? So here's the event handler, right? And I can send an event object, right? A function to execute each time the event is triggered. Bind an event handler to the key down JavaScript event. Okay, cool. So that's what it does. Cool. What's the last one? It's all the same, by the way, if you notice the pattern, right? The last one is an object containing the data that will be passed to an event handler, right? So I got some kind of data for the key event that I'm passing, right? All right. Let's try it with a function. So I'm going to do a function. And this time, what I want to do is any key that gets pressed, this is the event, right, that I want. Any key that gets pressed, I want to pass in this. I want to do this one. Instead of the change event, I want to do the key down event. All right, let's see what the difference is here. So one is change, and one is key down. All right, so every time I press the key down, let's see what happens. All right, so I've got my stuff here, and then I press in there, and I start pressing la la la, and space, right? What's happening there, right? That's the key down event, right? So when I press the button, space, or T, or whatever I want, it transfers the responsibility. It's actually doing the key down event on every time. I'm actually adding printing something else out to the console, the value of the current value that I have there already, right? Okay, whatever that current value is. All right, how about this? What about if I'm only looking for a specific key for the key down? If I'm only looking for, I don't know, if I press the A key or something like that. How do I find that? Is there a way of passing that information in? Well, we're listening for a key down event. There must be some kind of way of doing that. And is there a way of passing data inside? I don't know, maybe the key, whatever the key is. Is that possible? So I can do key dot, and it says publish, cancelable, jar, code, deep. That's like the event, right? That's the event, the object itself. Delegate target, default prevented, is trusted, the key. Oh, key code. Well, there we go. We got some key and key code happening, right? Key code, right? And when I press key code for a second, if I press that key code, notice it says the property. So key code is a particular property, and I can test for this. If my key code, whatever it is. So if what about if we show it? So say console.log, we'll print out the key code of whatever I'm entering in. Let's see if that's possible. So whatever the key is that I'm typing in. Is that possible? And if I go back here, and if I press T, and O, and M, right? So I'm just going to bring this up so you can see it's a little bit better, right? Actually, you know what I'll do just for this one? I'll move it over so you can see it on the side, okay? Just so you can see it over here, right? So it's easier for us to see. So here's my events, right? And I want to go to console here, and you can see that if I'm typing, and if I type in T, right? O, M, notice that it gives me the last one. Why does it give me the last one? It's triggering on key down, right? So as soon as I press the key, it triggers the event. I don't want that. I want it to, when a key is up, to trigger the event. Key up, right? There's key down and key up. There's different kinds of events. And let me show you that difference. So here's the key down, and let's look at the key up. There's different key press as well, but there's also key up. Just to show you the difference. I'll talk about that too in a second. So T, O, M. Notice that when I type a key, it gives me the key code, right? So I can get the information. I get any information that I want as I'm typing in. Hey, now we're talking about the ability for me to detect what I'm typing, right, as I type. If on key down, right, I'm getting a weird character, for example, an alphanumeric character. If I'm getting that inside of my contact number, that's not right, right? I shouldn't get any alphanumeric character. If I get an event that's somehow not numeric, right? If I get an object that's not numeric, I can't parse it, then I want to return an error somehow. I want to kick back an error, right? Or an email address, I can read if on the change event, I can say, hey, does that email address contain an @? If it doesn't, fire off an error. And that's really what HTML5 does for us. It fires off an error to check for what's happening inside of our contact form or our forms elements themselves. Let's just for you, I'll do the key pressed. So key press, here's a key press event. Key press event. So in there and I press T. O, M. See how it's back behind again? It doesn't do the key up. The key up is the key, right? Because that'll read whatever I just typed. Key press allows me to actually do one of these, right? So if I hold the keys down, right, and it doesn't allow me to do that right now, but if I hold the keys down, it's going to continuously do fire. It's going to continuously trigger, right, as I'm pressing. Key down only does it one time, right? So let me show you that. So let me go back here and erase this thing. So let's say reset the form, right, and let's just refresh the page for a second. So if I press T, and then if I press O-M, no problem. That's on the key press, right? And then if I press space, I can get continuous spacing, right? I can see that space is key code 32, right? All right, now let's just get rid of the key code. We don't care about this key code, but I just wanted to show you that you could get information if you wanted to, right? And let's go with the key down event, right? So here's a key down. Go back, and if I press this, T, O, M, and if I press space, again, I'm getting that same thing over and over again, but notice I'm getting Tom as I'm pressing things. So key down and key press, very similar, right? And as I'm typing these characters in, notice that I'm trying to type, and it's detecting, see how it's detecting with my key down event, even though nothing's showing up, it's actually showing the numbers incrementing. Watch, I'm pressing the F key, right? See over there how it's incrementing? Okay. Try that again. So I'm going to go back to key press. Okay, so here's my T, and I'm going to hold the T key down. I'm holding the T key down. Here, I'm holding the F key. Is it incrementing? Key press. One time. Right? So it's the other way around. Key press only once. And unless I press the space bar, but the space bar is special because I'm actually generating extra events, space bar. Right, but the rest of the keys only work once. Right? Key up, when I release the key, it triggers the event. Right? So both events can be used differently. So why would I need to use these things? Because sometimes I want to check when I'm physically typing something in the form. If I'm getting something wrong, if it finds an alphanumeric character, so how could it detect that a non integer or non-number character is being typed in, right? I can get the value, right? Whatever the value is of the object being typed in, the key of whatever the object is, so the value, whatever it is, right? So once I get that information, if it's the wrong type of information, I can stop it and I can give an error, pop up an error and says, please invalid data entered. I can stop a person from entering data. It's kind of annoying, but I can stop a person from entering data. Same thing with the change event. If I see that I can't parse the data, so I'm trying to parse the data for my thing. For example, I can check how long a set of character strings is. Like example, my full name should be at least 2 characters, or maybe it contains a first name and a last name. Well, let's say my first name, I only have one name, like I'm Prince or Madonna, right? I don't know. Sorry, Prince, rest in peace. But Prince or Madonna, right? Let's say, for example, I only have a first name. So at least 2 characters in a name. There's no one letter. I'm not A or B, right? I'm maybe, Al might be an okay first name, right? So that's okay, right? So 2 character minimum. So how do I check for that? Well, I want to do that before I do my submit button. Before I click submit, I want to get there, right? So I want to do something like that change event again. So I'm going to say, hey, on change, right? Depending on if the length of my value, my length of whatever the value is, if the length of what I'm getting back, string length, if you will, right? It's the string that I'm getting back. If the length is less than 2, generate an error and do some other stuff to it. Okay, let's try this out. So I can say this: if my full name val, right, and again, if I want my length somehow, well, full name dot length. Okay, let's try that. Full name dot length. There's my full name dot length, right? But let's just think about what that does. It says the number of elements in the jQuery object. That's not really what I want, right? It should be val. So I'm going to say something like this. I'm going to say the length. So let length is equal to full name dot length, full name dot val, right? Or let's say the full name string, sorry. And then whatever the full name string is, you notice I'm getting an any back because it's returning a value. And if I say, well, I want the length of the string to come back, right? So I don't know, full name string. Just trying this out in your head here. Full name string dot length. I want to kind of measure if there's such a thing. If the full name string dot length is less than 2, then trigger console.log short, right? So we're going to just print it out. See if that works first. If we have ability for us to detect the string length, right? And let's think if there's another function. Is there something else we can use in jQuery to detect the length of an object? Go back. If I start typing, change. Nothing happened. So that means it didn't trigger length, because length, we don't know what length is. Okay, so how do I find the length? Huh? I said 2, right? I said Tom, right? So let's try this again. So I'll go back here. So refresh, right? And let's put in A, trigger, right? So if it's less than a certain amount of characters, that would work. It has to be at least 2 characters long. So my string, I can't just put A and go all the way down. That means I can use the same logic AAAA for the length of the string that I'm getting. I can do that for all of them. Wait, if I can do something for all of them, oh man, that means I need a method, right? Because I don't want to do the same thing over and over again. Anything that I can do for all things, I can use a method for. That's one. Because that means all of them can be too short. I don't want my email address to be less than 2 characters long. In fact, my email address has to be how many characters long? At least 3 or 4, right? Or 5, right? It has to be this. It has to be at least 5 characters long, my email address, right? It has to have a first letter, worst case, right? An @ symbol, right? A second character after the @ symbol, a dot, and then at least 1 character after that. Theoretically, if there's some kind of, you can get to a .a domain or something like that. And most likely it's not. Most likely it's a 2-character domain at minimum, right? That means at least 6 characters that your email address has to be. There's no way it can be less than 6. Chances are it's going to be greater than 6 for sure, maybe 8, right? Because you're going to have maybe 2 characters, like al at, ab.co, right? That one might be your minimum length. That means chances are I can validate a simple email address by just saying that. That's the first part. How many minimum character length it's going to be, right? An @ sign, right? That's a different thing, though. Exactly one thing. So now we're talking about something else. We're talking about something called regular expressions, right? Has anyone heard of regular expressions? Anybody? Oh, this is a fantastic time. You guys don't hear about regular expressions. It's interesting. Regular expressions is an advanced topic, okay? But I'm going to tell it to you now so you've heard it one time, right? And we'll show you the different regular expressions, what they are. So if I go to regular expressions, see what that is, right? And if you look at Wikipedia, what it tells you, which is actually not a bad reference, and it basically says regular expression, or sometimes called regex or regexp, right? Sometimes called rational expressions, right? This is neat. What they do is it's kind of like a pattern that we can use, right, to check to see if the string that we're looking at meets that pattern. So I have a pattern, I evaluate a string, and if the string evaluates that pattern, right, then it's a pass. If the string fails that pattern, then it's a fail. Okay? I want you to think of it that way. So here's an example of match. And I have these, this is the kind of pattern that you'll see. Okay? This is what a pattern looks like for regular expressions. Where I have the brackets, and then I have a question mark, and a less than or equal sign, and a backslash. And this basically what it tells you is at least 2 spaces are matched, but only if they occur directly after a period. That's what this means, right? And before an uppercase letter. Now, this is a very difficult syntax to understand and to learn, right? So I'm going to direct you back, if you're interested in learning this early, because you need to use it at some point in your developer career, or even if you're a designer, you should be able to look at regular expressions. I know it's hard to look at. I know you're looking at it right now. But if you look at regular expressions, for you to understand regular expressions is super, super important, right? So if I look at regular expressions, if I say JavaScript, because that's what we want to do, let's just do JavaScript for a second. And if I look at, here we go, W3 schools, here's the regexp, right, reference for W3 schools. You can see that I can declare a regular expression like this, a pattern, right, with when I have this, the first thing is these forward slashes have to be outside of the pattern. This is what separates the pattern. Instead of brackets, whenever you see these forward slashes, that means anything inside the forward slashes is the expression. Okay, that's what I want you to think about. And then any kind of modifier that comes after, right? So here's an example. I perform case-sensitive matching. Case-insensitive matching, sorry. That means it doesn't matter if it's uppercase or lowercase, right? G, a global match. Find all matches rather than stopping after the first match. So keep matching how many I'm going to get. How many matches do I have in there? An example of that would be if I was searching for a common word inside of a string, and I wanted to know how many of those words I'm using. An example, the word the, T-H-E. How many thes do I have in a sentence? I don't know. Or how many ands or likes. Some people don't like to use like in a sentence because it's bad form, right? So how many likes do I have in my sentence, right? You can do that with by fetching global matches. Multi-line matching, matching multiple lines, right? Okay, brackets. This is something interesting. Brackets are used to find a range of characters. So example here, in this example, find any character between the brackets, A, B, or C. So I'm only looking for A, B, or C characters. Okay. Now I can also do something like this, right? The little caret, it says find any character not between the brackets. So if you see a character like this, don't include characters that include A, B, C. So what I do here, if I was looking for a phone number, right, that means I'm only looking for characters that are, the regular expression only cares for characters that are numeric. Example is any character that is a 0 to 9, which means any numeric character, any digit, right? And if I put a pipe in there, it's either one or the other that I care for, either an X or a Y, as an example, right? So this is the kind of methodology that you can use here. There's different meta characters you can use, find a word, find a digit, right? So only digits that speak between a certain range, and so on. There's different quantifiers. How many do I want? At least when you use the plus, matches any string that contains at least one of those characters, at least one number, right? As an example, right? At least one, and this one is any string that contains 0 or more. So this is 1 or more, this is 0 or more, and this contains 0 or 1, 0 or 1, right? So this is the way we can kind of create our regular expression. Okay. Love it. Fantastic. Okay. How do I do that? How do I match the regular expressions when it comes to formulating stuff? Well, I can do things like test for matching a string, returns true or false. I can do that. I can convert it to string, right? I can compile, right? Which we don't want to do that. This is deprecated, right? Execute, which is test for matching a string, returns the first match. So give me the first match. And that's the place, the location of the first match. This is the way we do regular expressions. But now I want to show an example of how to do regular expressions. So let's say, for example, I want a regular expression, right, for email. Now, by the way, not recommended, right? And I'll talk about that in a second, right? Regular expression for email. And here is the expression, right? So let me just go here. Here's the regular expression library. And here's email for category. And the email is right here. This is what the regular expression looks like for email. Hey, you understand this one? How did it come up with it, right? Well, it says, hey, don't include, something that includes backslash. We need an ampersand. So at least one ampersand, at least one character, at least one ampersand, right? And then after that, we need at least a lowercase a to z or an uppercase a to z, right? Hold on. And then at least one of those, right? And then an optional dot, right? Yes?
Is it really more efficient than
No. No. This is the best, fastest, most efficient way of doing anything when it comes to searching, right? Regular expressions are the de facto standard across all programming languages when it comes to searching things. That means at some point in your life as a developer, you need to understand this functionality. You don't need to do it today, all right? You don't even need to do it for my course, right? But you need at some point in your life to sit down, bear down, bite this really hard biscuit that's going to hurt, right? Because it hurts to learn this, right? And learn this stuff. Because if you don't do it, right, you're going to need it at some point, and you're going to just search it up and do it like this, right? Now, it's not required. It's not recommended. And the reason why it's not recommended, right, this is overly simple. This is a pattern title. Notice that it says 2 to 3. So I want at least, it says, at least one, so the optional dot is optional, right? That's what it says, right? And at least 2 to 3, a range of 2 to 3 alphanumeric characters. That's what it means. Okay, that's what this means. So if I was to use this, right, to do a search, that's the actual search. Now I want to search for an email. So email, validation, jQuery now with regular expressions, right? We know how to use jQuery a little bit. How do we validate email addresses using jQuery and regular expressions, right? well, they give you some examples, what this guy was trying to do this, and whatever, and then it says, here's an example. So function is valid email address. We pass in the email address, and then here's the pattern, right? Notice it starts with a forward slash, and then way over here, right? Here ends with a forward slash. Now, why did this person do this? That's why I told you not recommended. Email, not recommended. Right? Why? Because of all of this, and then return. By the way, this could be incorrect, right? It could be incorrect. Tomorrow it could change. The rules behind email addresses could change tomorrow, and then your validation would be wrong. Right? Just letting you know, right? Because web changes, so web standards change. Well, we're returning our pattern.test, right? And if this email address is true, it's going to return true or false. Test returns true if it's a true valid email address, okay? Let's use this piece of code in our code just to test it out, right, for email, right? So if I was to take this exact pattern, right, and take this whole thing and show you how this works. And what I'm going to do is, remember I talked about making little functions. Now I'm in a function. I could include the function in there, but chances are I don't want to do that. I want to include it outside of this function here. It's available on the main scope, right? Notice how Visual Studio Code detected a regular expression, right? In my case, because I've included a little extension that detects regular expressions. It might work for you too by default. And it says if I hover over it, it's a pattern, which is a regular expression. It detects it right away, right? So that's what this thing does. Okay, cool. So I pass in my email address in there. It's a string, has to be a string, right? And then it's going to spit out true or false if it's valid. If it's valid, hallelujah, right? We move forward. If it's not, though, right, then it's going to spit out false, and then we have to say we're going to return them back to the email address, right? So let's try this out. So we can check to see if it's too short, and if it's too short, right, for my name, we can say something like this. We can say, so here's a console log. Instead of a console log, we're going to produce an alert, which is I hate doing, right? But let's just put it down this way, okay? So my alert is going to say email, or sorry, not email, name too short. Right, that's my alert, okay? Full name too short, right? If it's less than length 2. And we're going to do this trick, right? This full name focus, full name select stuff, right? Where we're going to kind of, before we get into this submission stuff, right? Before we submit, right? Whenever you lose focus, when the full name is changed, we're going to, if this is a problem, if this length is 2, we're going to set the focus to the new full name element and select everything, right? We're going to send a little pop-up that says error, something's wrong, right? By the way, is there other things we can do with errors? And if you hover over it, it says message any. What other things can we do with errors? If I press comma, is there another option for alerts? Some kind of error or a pop-up on the window. This is the window object, by the way. Alert is a short form of window.alert. That's what it is, right? Alert on the window object. Okay, let's test this out first. I'm going to go back to here. And I'm going to type in A and press tab, and it says, hey, your full name is too short. Right? Oh, man, I really hate pop-ups. I really hate pop-ups, right? What could we do to change this, right, without messing up our layout, right? Maybe put a little bit of space between all these things and include an error message text box, like some kind of error message text box that comes in between these things, right, where I can put in something else, like a div tag or a span that includes the message, but underneath it. So I space this out a little bit more, right? They're hidden. And when I get an alert, right, some kind of message, it shows that comes up, right? Let's see what I'm talking about here. So on my, I can change my actual HTML, right? So I can go back to my HTML, which is in my contact form. And in my contact form itself, you can see that I have my email address and my contact number and my name. And inside there, I have a label and a form group. And you know what? Maybe I can put in another label that's hidden, right? A label that's hidden somehow, right? I don't know, maybe, or some kind of span, a span tag, or some kind of div or something, right? Maybe a div tag, with an ID of, message, right? Full name message, full name message, right? There's my ID, full name message. Sorry, let's take away that first angry left-hand sign, right? Right? And then inside of there, I don't have a message yet, right? But I want to make it hidden. Can I do this? Hidden? And to test this out, I can put in some error, right? To test this out. I don't know what the error is, but if there's a error, it's going to be, full name. And I'll just make it really clear. I'll make this really long. Error message, right? Full name error message. Some kind of error message is going to come up for full name, right? Now, if it's hidden, should I see this some error? No. Let's see if it works. And nothing, right? I don't see it. Okay, cool. So now that I have this ID, this thing here that I got, right? What I can do is I can inject information in there when it's hidden. Instead of bringing up the pop-up, I want to put some information in there, but then it's always going to be there, right? Let's see what I'm talking about here. So I'm going to go back in here, my app.js, then we'll take a break after this. And then we'll take that regular expression and use it, okay? So instead of doing this, right, I want to do something like this. I want to say that I want to get a reference here in right away, which is to my full name error message, right? You can do this too. And my full name error message, I want to make it, I want to show my full name error message, right? That's the show method, right? If this is true, right? And I want to, in my full name error message, so again, I can say, when I show it, remember, show also has some additional features, right? I got some overloads, right? One of them is duration. And then another one is duration and what happens when I'm complete, right? And then another one is show with some options, my animation options. So my duration, how fast do I want to show my error message? I want to show it in like fast, like really fast, like 100 milliseconds or even less, right? So 0 is what I want to send it in. So my iteration is 0, happens right away. But on complete, when it's complete, when it's finally shown, right? What I want to do here in my full name error message is I want to show my error message in there, right? So I want to say something like $sign this, which points to the query selector that I found, right? And then dot text or some kind of, because there's going to be text inside of there. I don't have any text inside my div tag right now, right? I want to put text in there equal to something like, full name too short, right? I want to put the text in there. And I also want to color the text, right? I want to color the text, I want to change my CSS. So there's my CSS property, right? To, what is it? The color of my text. Let's put my color of the text to red, right? That's my value, and I think that should do it, right? Let's see if it works. Who knows? All right. We're good. I put A, press tab, and then full name feature. What if I go back there? Notice it's highlighted, and if I put my real name, it's going to still show that. So when it passes the test, I want it to go away, right? So what I can do, of course, is this is the if, right? And then I can go here on the else. This is my validation, right? On the else, I can do something like this. I can say, okay, else, if it's not too short, if it's greater than 2, right, or something else, right, then I want to do the opposite of this. So I want to hide this error message. So I'm going to take this, put it inside there, and hide. Even if it's hidden, it'll still stay hidden, right? It's not going to hurt anything. So back here, A, okay, go in there and change it, and then it's gone. Right, so good functionality. Now, there's a problem with this. What's the problem? The problem is it changes my layout. It bounces around with my layout. See how that opened up and then came back? You may not want that. I don't want that at all, right? I don't want the div tag to be hidden. I want the text to be replaced, right? Because the text should be nothing in there, And when I go in there, I wipe it out. So instead of hiding it and showing it, I could have done a replace, find replace. For now, we're going to leave it as is. Yes. You have a question on your face. Yes. You have a question. All right, so that's that one. Okay, let's say we hum along. We enter our contact number. By the way, there's a regular expression for a phone number we can find, right? For now, we're not going to. And let's say, for example, I do this one of these things, and it's not right. My phone number is not right. No one's checked me, right? But I come to my email address, and I want to use regular expressions to validate my email address, right? Well, now I can use this same thing. I can say, well, my email, right? Because just like I've done this, email is my email address, right? Email.change, on email change, right? Just like we've done over here, I can put an anonymous function, right? Where I want to check that if I've got my regular expression. So if is valid, right, email address, and I can pass in the value of my email, right, .val, right? That's the only time that it's positive. So if it's true, right, do I get too many brackets? There. If that's true, if it's a valid email address, then go forward, right? Right? But if it's not valid, which is really what I want, right? If it's not a valid email address, that's the not sign, right? Then I want you to do a couple things. I want you to email.focus, right? And then email, right, .select. And I also want to do this idea where I want to show my error message. Now, I don't have an error message, yes?
But how can we send somebody to a different website using jQuery? Like, let's say there's header location.
Off topic right now.
But I was thinking
After.
You can send it to Wikipedia with an email address.
No, it's incorrect. It's off topic and incorrect. Thank you for your question, though. But no, it's off topic. Okay? But we want to do something like this. We want to do some of the same kind of error message. And we don't have an email error message. But I'm going to copy this for now. All right, so I'm going to copy this piece. And because it's easier to destroy than to build. I'd say that a couple times, right? And we're going to go in there, and instead of my full name email error message, we're going to have an email. We don't have it yet. Email error message. And inside of my HTML, right, I'm going to go back to my contact page. Inside my HTML, I'm going to take this and redo it down here inside my email down here. And we'll call this email error message, right? Right? So now if I do it, let's check this out. If I go in and say, Tom, I'm good, my contact number, who cares, right? Because it doesn't check yet. And then I want to put my email address in there. Uh-oh. Oh, man, full name too short. That's not what it's supposed to say. I didn't do exactly what I wanted to. It's got to say email address incorrect, invalid email. Right, so invalid email address, right? So Tom, blah, 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 and then invalid email address puts me back there. It won't let me to continue, right? Won't let me to continue. If I click tab again, that's okay. It'll allow me to go on, right? Shouldn't. It should redirect me back. When I change or blur, I can also check on blur to see that I'm losing focus, and then I can also do that check, right? Which means that there's another method that I can call to check my stuff. Huh? Absolutely, it happens anyway. If you try and submit this form right now, and it would normally the submit button wouldn't let you submit if it's valid invalid email address. Yeah, no, it would stop you, right? Without any kind of I've disabled my default things here. That's why it's stopping me, right? All right, so I'm just trying this with jQuery. So now if I type in a valid email address, so I type in something like tom@example.com. If I just type tom@example, it's going to say no, it's incorrect. If I go tom@example.com, then it allows me to go forward. But I got to do the same trick, right? If it's valid, that's cool. And then else, what happens when if everything is okay? Well, then I want to hide my error again, right? So you can see how complex we can get if I really want to. But this is a great example of how we can use a regular expression to test whether we have a pattern coming into our input, right? And again, is valid email address. I can make another one called is valid phone number, right? And it is valid full name, is valid. And this is the kind of simple validation, very simple validation we do on the front end in addition to using HTML without disabling HTML, right? We do both. And then we check on the back end too to make sure we're getting the right error. Why? Because the biggest problem we have as developers is the user, right? The user, we love the user. Without the user, we don't have a job. But the user always messes us up because they can enter whatever they want in these boxes. They can try and break our code. They can try and hack our website. They can do all kinds of stuff here, and we want to try and avoid all these things. Let's take a short break, and when we come back, we'll talk about AJAX.